Hello, dear students. Welcome back to EasEnglish, your English learning program. My name is Rodrigo Lasso Campo, your English teacher, and this time I am really happy to present lesson 111. Lesson 111 in Curso Debutante Level 2. The title of this lesson is Senses. Senses. In the lesson, a girl is going to be talking about how many senses she has. This girl will be talking about how many senses she has and what parts of the body she uses to sense. For example, this picture shows the sense of hearing. Hearing. This girl hears the bird singing and the bee buzzing. Buzz, buzzing. And this other picture shows the sense of touching. The girl uses her hand to touch this caterpillar. The girl touches the caterpillar, a fuzzy caterpillar. So touching and hearing are examples of two senses. Two senses. She uses her ear to hear and she uses her hand to touch. This is what we are going to be talking about in lesson 111. Let's get down to the lesson. Primero, usted y yo vamos a leer la lección. Segundo, hablaremos acerca de la lección. Tercero, usaremos los adjetivos posesivos. Y finalmente, vamos a desarrollar las actividades. Let's do it. Usted y yo vamos a leer en voz alta. I like to learn about things. How do I learn about things? I use my 5 senses. I use my eyes to see. I see birds and bees. I use my ears to hear. I hear birds singing. I hear bees buzzing. I use my nose to smell. I smell pretty flowers. I use my fingers to touch. I touch the fuzzy caterpillar. I use my tongue to taste. I taste sweet berries. I like to go to my garden. I use my 5 senses. I use them to see and hear. I use them to smell and taste. I use them to touch. I learn a lot from my senses. This girl likes to learn about things. She likes learning about things. And she uses her 5 senses to learn about things. What senses does she use? She uses her seeing with her eyes, her hearing with her ears, her smelling with her nose, her touching with her fingers, and her tasting with her tongue. 5 senses. Seeing, hearing, smelling, touching and tasting. She uses her eyes to see. She sees birds and bees. She uses her eyes to see. She sees birds and bees. She uses her ears to hear. She hears birds singing and bees buzzing. Zzz. She uses her nose to smell. She smells pretty flowers. She uses her fingers to touch. She touches the fuzzy caterpillar. She uses her tongue to taste. She tastes sweet berries. She likes to go to her garden. And in her garden, she uses her 5 senses. She uses her 5 senses to see and hear. She uses her 5 senses to smell and taste. She uses her 5 senses to touch. She learns a lot from her senses. This girl has 5 senses. I have 5 senses. You have 5 senses. Seeing with her eyes. Hearing with her ears. Smelling with her nose. Touching with her fingers, tasting with her tongue. She uses her 5 senses. I use my 5 senses. You use your 5 senses. You and I use our 5 senses. We use our 5 senses to see, to hear, to smell, and taste, and to touch. We learn a lot from our senses. This girl learns a lot from her senses. You are learning English because you didn't know how to speak English at all. Now you can say many things in English. You are learning English. This girl learns a lot from her senses. You and I learned a lot from our senses. Everybody learns a lot from their senses. What does this girl learn from her senses? Well, she learns that birds and bees fly, birds sing, and bees buzz. She learns that flowers smell good. Flowers smell good. She learns that caterpillars feel soft. And she also learns that berries taste good, yummy, delicious. She learns a lot of things from her senses. You and I learned a lot of things from our senses. Now we are talking about possessive adjectives. Los possessive adjectives son palabras que se usan para expresar de quién son las cosas, a quién pertenecen, quién es el dueño de X o Y cosa de la cual se está hablando. Right? Aquí se habla de parts of the bodies. Eyes, ears, tongue, fingers, and nose. Entonces, delante de cada uno de esos parts of the body, usamos una palabra para indicar a quién pertenece. En este caso, la chica está hablando de ella misma. Yo voy a hablar de mí mismo, usted va a hablar de usted mismo. Entonces decimos, I use my eyes to see. I use my eyes to see. Ahora voy a hablar de usted. Usted hable de mí. You use your eyes to see. Ahora hablemos de Pedro. Pedro uses his eyes to see. Hablemos de Helen. Helen uses her eyes to see. Hablemos de you and me. You and I use our eyes to see. Ahora yo hablo de usted y de María. Usted habla de mí y María. You and Maria use your eyes to see. Now let's talk about John and Luisa. John and Luisa use their eyes to see. I use my ears to hear. You use your ears to hear. Pedro uses his ears to hear. Helen uses her ears to hear. You and I use our ears to hear. You and Maria use your ears to hear. John and Luisa use their ears to hear. I use my nose to smell. You use your nose to smell. Pedro uses his nose to smell. Helen uses her nose to smell. You and I use our noses to smell. You and Maria use your noses to smell. John and Luisa use their noses to smell. I use my fingers to touch. You use your fingers to touch. Pedro uses his fingers to touch. Helen uses her fingers to touch. You and I use our fingers to touch. You and Maria use your fingers to touch. John and Luisa use their fingers to touch. I use my tongue to taste. You use your tongue to taste. Pedro uses his tongue to taste. Helen uses her tongue to taste. You and I use our tongues to taste. You and Maria use your tongues to taste. John and Luisa use their tongues to taste. En cada uno de los anteriores enunciados hemos empleado los possessive adjectives y hay que anotar que cada uno de ellos concuerda, coincide con el sujeto de la oración, con la persona que habla. Así, para I yo uso my, para you se usa your, para he se usa his, para she se usa her, para we se usa our, para you, plural, se usa your, y para they se usa their. Por escrito lo puede notar, así que preste suficiente atención. Well, I think we are moving on to the activities.